Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to make a card with an enchanted forest. Hope you enjoy! So I started with a piece of paper that's 5 by 7 inches. And using some Distress Oxide in old paper, I rubbed off the excess and then lightly applied it in the top left corner, roughly where I wanted my moon to go. And I just made sure that this would be completely covered by the moon mask. So putting that small moon mask from Lavinia Stamps on top of that area, I then applied some paprika ink over the moon. And I did this by applying the ink onto the mask first and then gently pulling it out. And I just held it in place with my fingers, but you can always tape it down if you prefer. Next, I added some Merlot ink, and I put this along the right-hand side of the background, a little bit on the top, and then underneath the paprika ink. I didn't cover the entire background with these two inks because I wanted a nice splash of color in between. So I put some of the pine ink in between these two reds and then used it to sort of map out where I wanted my ground, the ground of the forest to be. Then I used some of the lime punch to fill in the rest of the ground. Now I know that when you mix red and green together, they will make a nice brown. So that's what I wanted to do at the bottom right of this card. So I put the Merlot first and then the lime punch on top. So there's a little bit of brown on the bottom right. Now that I have the ink where I want it to be, I'm going to go back and darken and blend the colors until I'm happy with the background. Now I prefer to use foam ink blending tools when I use these Elements inks because it allows you to use lots of pressure and have nice vibrant backgrounds like this. And just for a finishing touch, I'm going to use some of the graphite color and blend it around the entire background, just along the edges. And now you can see the finished background. I'll just remove the mask there. So it's ready for stamping. So I'm going to start by stamping this skeleton tree. And I'm using some VersaFine Clair in Nocturne. And I'm just going to stamp it so that it overlaps the moon on the left-hand side. And I want to stamp this again on the right-hand side of the moon, so that these two trees are in line with each other. So I'm just lining up the bottom of the trees, and then I can push this into place. Now to make this into a forest, I'm going to stamp a few more of these skeleton trees. But to make it look like there is a bit of dimension, I'll change the height of them. So I'm just going to stamp this one a little bit higher. And again, I'm using the bottom of the tree to sort of judge where it needs to go. And then the last one, which is furthest away, will be up the highest. So once I'm happy with the position of my trees, I'm going to add some ink underneath with one of the Lavinia Stamps stencils, just to help ground the trees. So I'm using the Merlot ink and I'm just lightly blending, pulling the ink from the stencil downwards. And I want these tree lines to go all the way across so that it looks like there's hills and more dimension on the card. Then I will stamp the fairy Brawn, and I'm going to put her on the bottom of the card so that she looks like she's sitting in this enchanted forest. And I'm just using that same VersaFine Clair Nocturne for her. Now, once I'm happy with her, I'm going to just add a bit of ground underneath her as well. So using that same hill mask and the Merlot ink, I'll just add a little bit of ground underneath her. And again, I'm applying the ink on the mask and pulling it downwards. Now, while I have this ink handy, I'm going to use one of the Lavinia stencils. This is called Splendor. And I'm just going to put the moon mask back on and then lightly blend some of that Merlot ink around the background. And I'm just blending it behind the fairy where the trees are. And then I'll lift it up and you can see it adds a little bit of interest and texture to the background. Next, I'm going to stamp one of the fairy foragers. And this stamp comes in a set of 4 little fairies. This one's sort of sitting, and I thought he would look really cute if I stamped him into bronze hand. So I just lined it up so it looks like the fairy is sitting right on her hand. And I think it looks perfect. Then I'm going to use the mini branch and just add this along the top of the card and also along the right hand side. And I think this just helps to add a bit more of a enchanted feeling to the forest. You could of course omit this if you prefer. And now you can see the background there, just gorgeous. So to color in the fairy's wings, I'm going to use a combination of Jelly Roll pens. I've listed the colors on the side there. And I just put them in random places. And I love how these fill in so that you can't see the background colors behind the fairy wings. Now the Stardust pens are a bit less opaque. So I'm going to use the gold one to color in this fairy's hair and also on the smaller fairy's wings. Now once I'm happy with the fairy wings and the fairy's hair, I'm going to use the white pen to outline both the smaller and the larger fairy. And that helps when you have a darker background like this to bring the image to life. Now once I'm happy with the fairy wings, I'm going to use a sparkle pen to put a little bit of sparkle all over these fairies. So I put some on their wings, the larger fairy's hair, and also on the moon. Now this sparkle pen that I'm using is a generic brand, but it's very similar to the Spectrum Noir. So it's one of these brush pens that's just perfect for adding a little bit of sparkle to everything. And once I've added all the sparkle, I will let this dry completely before finishing the card. So I've used a slightly larger card base, and I'm first going to put down a black mat and then add the background onto this. And I thought that this needed a little bit of black around it just to finish off the background. So the black mat is 1/4 inch bigger than the background, and then the white card base is 1/4 inch bigger as well. So on the inside of the card, I'm just going to use one of the Lavinia Stamps sentiments. This says, "Every dream begins with a wish." And then to finish off the inside of the card, I'm going to use that same stencil, Splendor, and then the Merlot ink. Without adding any extra ink, I'm just going to use what's left on my ink blender and add a little splash of color around the sentiment. And now you can see the finished card with all that gorgeous sparkle and the sentiment. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. If you haven't already, Please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!